Today's topic is all about creating Power BI reports that deliver, right? And the way we're going to go through this is by looking at 15 items we should all be doing throughout the report creation process, right? And I did want to keep it a little bit more fun and engaging, so I did create everything in Power BI, so no slides, and also shows off bookmarks as well, because I know a lot of people are against bookmarks, but there we go. Now, before we actually get into those 15 items, though, I think it's important to set the scene here, right? A very common scenario I always find myself in, I'm sure many of you can relate, and it starts off like this. We go live with the solution. That first phase that I regularly find myself in is that excitement phase. Everyone can't wait to start using the report. It's new. There's new features from the most up-to-date update. There's a mention of Fabric in there, you know, that honeymoon period right at the beginning. Everyone wants to start using it. But then I check out the usage logs. Less people are accessing. I talk to a few people. They start saying, why can't I do, why? Check the usage logs again. Less people accessing the report. And then finally, we get to give me Excel. In other words, they've been the solution. We put all the time, money, and effort in. They've reverted back to an Excel spreadsheet, maybe another Power BI report with just a simple matrix on there, right? Something was missing. And that's the normal scenario I find. So the 15 items we're going to go through today helps us keep this stage here. We love this report, that impress stage at the beginning. A report needs to look good. You need to have that. But how do we continue offering value as we go through the report journey so people continuously stay engaged? Okay, these are the 15 items we're going to go through today all, and it's worth calling out, this is not a deep dive. I've done talks on the first two that took an hour. However, when I put this together, I thought to myself, what's the goal here? I would like all of you to walk away today with some of these items, and I promise you, you can start implementing them today, right? And the other thing I want to call out, I think it's important. Everything we're going to go through today are things that I've implemented continuously many times with various clients with great success and great failure. And that's why I love methodologies, right? It failed, get the feedback, reincorporate it until it works. So I'm going to be sharing the feedback that I got and the experience that I had. So let's get into it. Starting off with the number one thing we should all be doing here to create reports that deliver. It's the audience, right? So in other words, if you're talking to the wrong people, you're doomed from the start. Okay, point number one, everyone. The number one reason why reporting projects fail, to me, it's simple. It's because we haven't included the actual end users in the process, right? That's it. How can you meet the end user's needs when we're not actually including them in the process? And of course, it's important because we're gathering the requirements from the actual end user. But there's another reason. It builds that layer of trust. If you don't have that layer of trust when you go into the go live, you're going to regret it. It really just decreases the chances of adoption as well. The other thing I want to call out, point number two, is this. This is what I regularly find. I go in, about to start a project, and I find maybe a group of seniors or other representatives in the organization, and they claim to understand all the information that the end users can provide, right? They know the pain points of the end users. And these individuals usually have a bit more influence or decision-making power. But the point I'm making is they don't understand the requirements like the end users. They can't build that layer of trust that is needed. The end users are the ones who understand day-to-day challenges better than anyone else. Now, I can't talk about audiences and not mention point four, right? And I'm going to make a statement here. Feel free to disagree with me. Gathering the requirements from too many audiences is as bad as gathering the requirements from the wrong audience in the first place, right? Here's the thing, right? You're probably thinking, why? That will take you down the path of creating these reports that are overly complicated and out of focus, right? It happens. And from my experience, maybe you guys are all better at this, trying to fit everything onto a single canvas for a single audience is a struggle sometimes, let alone multiple audiences. So here's my general rule. I like to stick to one audience per solution. If it's more, I like to have a bit of an informal chat beforehand with them to understand if they have a common purpose. If they don't have a common purpose and you put them all in the same session to gather the requirements, it will start to get messy. The other thing from experience, if you do go ahead with multiple audiences, it's likely one will walk away feeling somewhat satisfied and happy because they were the more influential or the loudest ones. They got more onto the canvas. Everyone else will walk away feeling frustrated and eventually take it out on the technology as well, right? Point number 5, everyone, around audiences. Here's the thing. I always like to say, if it was any other job or any other profession, and I said, I'm going to create this product here, but I'm not going to speak to the actual end users, you'll probably say I'm crazy. So why is it not the same for reporting and dashboarding? Why should we not offer the same level of care when we're gathering the requirements here? And lastly, always push back, right? Raise it at risk at least. Whenever I walk into a project like this, who's the audience? Where do they sit? Can I get them in the room? Heard all the excuses. The business critical priorities are not available. They're all too busy. We can't align their calendars. They're new to the organization, etc., etc. It doesn't matter. Try and clue them in as early on as you can in the process. So really, well, the action here is this. Identify the true end users and book a requirements workshop with them, right? And I'm really going to go out here and say this. This is the most important thing. If this goes terribly wrong, all the other 14 points I'm going to show you won't be able to help you, right? That's how strongly I feel about this part here. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. The second point that we should incorporate to create those reports that deliver. Talk business. So what do I mean by this all? You've identified your audience. This is what we should be doing next. Let's get them in the room, in a meeting, on the call, wherever. And it's now time to think about the business value. So understand the objective. In other words, where are you trying to go? Or understand the challenge. What are you trying to overcome, right? It happens so often to me as well, right? I get given an ask, a high level requirement, and I just run with it. And I don't actually pause sometimes to say, what are we doing? Why are we doing? And what's the value? And honestly, I push myself to do that before every project. And it helps you avoid building those solutions where you get at the end of the road and they're not being used. The other thing, I'm sure everyone has heard, dashboards are dead, right? I'm sure you've seen this floating around. I've had some interesting conversations around this. Where I stand is dashboards aren't dead as a tool for answering business questions. I feel like the information we're putting on the canvas is not the right information in the first place, right? And that's why it's so important to start with the business objective or the challenge, because for point 3, sometimes a dashboard is genuinely not needed. An Excel spreadsheet, running that SQL script and getting the extract from there is good enough. But we don't ask the right questions right at the beginning to understand that from the get-go, right? The other thing, why should you start with a business objective? Why shouldn't you just simply ask, what do you want? How do you want to see it? We want to stay away from that. Measuring the ROI. Traditionally, many of us may, or I used to do anyway, the value of a report is or equals number of views. It's not the number of times people view the report, it's what they do from the insights that they gathered from there. And that's why I like starting off with the objective or the challenge, basically the ultimate goal, and try and make it somewhat measurable. Because if you do, you then understand if you're moving towards it, if you're moving away from it, or if you've achieved it. And that's how I like to measure value from a report that I build. Point number 5, really important, really helpful. How many times have you gathered requirements and someone said, I want everything? Or they come in with an Excel spreadsheet and they say, this is what we want, let's rebuild it. And by the way, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not pushing anyone down the path of basically removing important information just so we can fit stuff on the canvas. That's not the right approach. However, when in these types of workshops, when running these sort of engagements, I find many people might panic in there as well. I do it as well, workshop fatigueness, misunderstandings, etc. So if you start with the objective, this is what I do. Stick it on the board or wherever you're presenting, and everything else that you collect afterwards, ask the questions continuously. Does it directly impact this? It'll help you funnel everything out. A KPI example, 15, 20 KPIs. Follow such approach. It allows you to understand, well, which ones are the genuine KPIs we need for this solution. The other ones aren't being discarded. They just belong somewhere else. So the action, everyone. Ask the audience where are you trying to go? What does success look like? Why are we in this room together? Why are we calling this meeting? And in all honesty, if they can't give you that answer at the beginning, I would pause and really raise some questions. Yep. Okay, so measure success, all to do with KPIs. So you've identified the audience, you also understand where are you trying to go now, right? The next thing is, how do you know if you're on target to it? And that's what the KPI is all about. It's about answering the question, how do you know, or are you on target to where you're trying to go? And it's absolutely key to have this. The common question I get at this point is, how many KPIs, Laz, should we have? 5 to 7, but I never stick to it. It depends on the client, depends on the audience. And again, with these sort of things, I hate being so precise, in all honesty, right? I like to limit 5 to 7, see how it goes with people you're gathering the requirements from. Point number 2, it goes without saying, if my objective was increase sales by X amount by the end of financial year 24, I can't say my sales is margin or average transaction value. That's a standalone number. I want to benchmark a last year value, a preset target, or so on. That way we know if it's positive or negative. The other point, don't overcomplicate targets. So this is what I mean on. I mentioned at the beginning, I love a good methodology, right? Everything you're hearing today, I didn't just make this up. So many good people out there. Miko Yuk, Colin Spalmer, Andy Kirk, etc. I've picked up a lot from these people, right? And I'm happy to say it. I've tested it all out as well. I've failed so many times at it, and I'm just trying to do it again until I find my style. The point I'm making until now, I haven't mentioned tech. All we're talking about is people. How do you ask questions to people? How do you respond to the pushbacks, right? So the point I'm making here is you need to try all this out and find it or make it your own. That's how it will eventually work, right? But I've also read and seen people saying to be very precise with the targets, right? So I'm in a call, we're talking about impressions, right? And you're meant to derive an absolute target. It will never happen. If we can't get to a benchmark, allow the user to go away. That's an internal conversation. You're already pushing the limits by simply not asking, what do you want, right? So don't be so precise with that. The other one, prioritize KPIs. I mean, come on. You're going to have many KPIs all, right? And this is, at this point, this is how I love to see if the workshop's going well or bad. If they can't provide any KPIs, it's going really bad. I've been there. If it provides 15, 20 KPIs, that's a good thing. Follow what we said. Start with the challenge. If this is the challenge, you then say, okay, let's just order them in priority or the most impactful ones. When they start debating amongst themselves, you take a step back and you know the workshop's going well. And then you can derive which ones are the right ones. Don't dismiss any though. Put them on the back burner list. It might be a different solution. And then lastly, I could talk about this a lot more, but if you think about it, we just mentioned audience, objective, challenge, KPIs. What goes onto the canvas? The KPIs, numerical attributes, your facts, etc. Now, how do you want to view those? Slice and dice them, filter them. In other words, what's causing the KPI to be high in the green, low in the red? Gather this information as well at this point. Those will be your descriptive characteristics, your dimensions essentially, right? And also ask, what actions will you be taking? Because if they will never take an action, then is it really worth being on the canvas? After all, don't we want to create solutions that promote action? So, the takeaway from this all is, before you start these workshops, this is what I do. I have 10 questions I walk in there with, written down. But here's the tip. Make sure you have the same questions, just mentally prepared in different words. Why? You're going to go into these sessions, right? And you're going to get the death stare. What is that? Basically, when you ask people, what does success look like? And they just look at you with a blank face and not giving you any answers. It will always happen. It happens to me all the time. Having those backup questions, again, we're the ones facilitating the workshop. It's really good for us to be able to make sure everyone is answering the questions, is collaborating, and I find that always to work really well. Okay. Moving on all. Where is the data? So let's first figure out what we actually need. Okay. I haven't mentioned tech. I haven't mentioned anything to do with data availability. I stole this from Miko Yuk, and I think it works really well. I get a lot of pushback, but try it out. When I send out the agendas to gather the requirements, I always put a note saying, we're not going to talk about visuals, technology, data availability, nothing like that. Why? Because again, I feel like naturally what we always do, we go straight into those conversations and we don't spend enough time on thinking the business value that we're delivering. So it helps us focus on the right conversations. But with that said, I mean, you can't go and create a report if you don't have the underlying data model. So you're eventually going to get there. But one scenario I was in previously, when I did this with a digital marketing team, we gathered the KPIs, we understood how we need to see it. Someone called out, the data's not available, right? At that point, you usually stop there, okay, dismiss it, take it off. I said, no, let's continue going with it. Let's continue going with it. We added it onto the board. It was really important. When you get to the stage where you have to speak to the right people to see if the data's available, guess what? We found it wasn't available, but with additional effort, it could be added in eventually. And to me, that's a gold duster, right? So in other words, blue sky thinking on the first, second session, let's see what the users really need to help them do their job as well, right? So again, don't focus on the tech, the data right from the beginning. I promise you, there'll always be a moment for that. Okay, the last one on the top, ask why. Very common, right? Laz, we need the last 5 years worth of data. Laz, I have 26 KPIs. Need to export it into Excel. Need it to land in my mailbox. I need to go down to the lowest grade. Why should we have the last 5 years when after asking you a few questions, you just said it's this year versus last year with no trending? Why should we have 26 KPIs after asking you a few questions? Only 10 really tell us if we're moving towards your ultimate purpose. Why should we go to the lowest grade when that individual will barely be doing this? Why don't we move into a separate solution? You get the idea here. Ask questions, push back, ask why. And I always tell the clients I'm working with or customers that I'm working with, I'm not here just to say yes to everything, right? And at the end of the day, I promise you, your end users will be grateful for it if they're a good bunch of people to work with, right? So don't hesitate to push back. It's the right thing to do in order to create a solution that offers genuine value. Okay. I'm going to pause there for a moment. Until now, the top row was purely requirement gathering all. And you might disagree with me. This is what most people, can we save the question for the end?
No.
Play back, sorry.
Can you explain the last?
Oh yeah, of course. Ask why. This one. Okay. The point I'm making all is that top row is all requirement gathering. This is what people usually avoid, right? I like to spend more time there, right? Now, one that is really, that ties into this is get approval. Before moving on, let's make sure everyone is on the same page. This one's pretty simple. As soon as you gather the requirements, this is what I do. I summarize them, clean them up, make sure they make sense. I send them off to the end users. I give them a day, 2 days, however long they need to reflect on what was discussed. Once they've had time to do that, they don't always do that, I book a validation call. I invite everyone back in there, and that's the last opportunity you have, by the way, to make sure that there weren't any misunderstandings or miscommunications from either side. It happens to me all the time before you move into design, right? So make sure you get a call in. And lastly, here's a shame from experience. I feel like everyone should be held accountable, right? Not just the person gathering the requirements, designing the work, building the report, right at the end, you followed it to the T, no one's using it, right? It holds people accountable. If they see their name on it as well and say, well, actually, we're going to build this because that's what we said, it promotes people to maybe change things that aren't exactly right. Okay, so all the action here is get approval before moving on to the next phase. Okay, how are we doing with time? I think we're good. Okay, moving on. You've done all the requirement gathering. It's now time to move into, before development, design, wireframing. I'm going to show you how I do this. I've used a few methods and how I feel works best for me. So wireframing, the blueprint to get everyone on board. Okay, I'll show you some examples. But very quickly, I like to say, if you do the requirement gathering correct, if you nail that, and then you do the wireframing well enough as well, that's the blueprint to success. In fact, you can pass this on to someone else and they can do all the development as well, right? I do get pushback sometimes that it's a waste of time and effort and money. We don't need it. Let's just go straight into development. I don't accept that, right? It helps us save time and money rather than do dev work and then having to reverse anything back. Apart from that, I always like to say it's another opportunity to help us identify any major misunderstandings. And it happens when I work with different audiences. So if I'm working with an audience that maybe isn't as used to a visual report or is more used to your standard operational style reports, this is where wireframes come in even more helpful, right? So how do I do them? Not rendering so great on the screen, I'll be honest. They look pretty usually. But anyway, I always start off up here, PowerPoint. I only use PowerPoint, by the way. I have used Balsamic, I have used mockups. I do use Figma sometimes, but I'm against it now. I'll tell you why afterwards. Start off here, create maybe a set of template files, and then I move here. This is not Power BI, this is PowerPoint. What do I like to do? I like to take shapes, boxes, or text boxes, icons, and add them on there. And by the way, when I gather the requirements, I also ask for some sample attributes from the elements that we collected. And then I basically add these into Excel. I put some dummy data next to them, enter it manually into Power BI, and that's how I get these visuals. It just really brings it to life so end users can understand this is exactly what we're going to get. But I never give it to them like that. I move to this stage, and you can see that this is PowerPoint. I always love to add annotation boxes around, not to say click this and it expands here. Think about what we said earlier, it's really important. This is where you're trying to go. This is how you know you're on target. If you're not on target, or if you are on target, this is what's causing it. These are the type of actions you can take. In other words, bring the narrative to life through here. Show them how it's embedded in there. That way they can call out if it is correct or it's not correct before you move further into development. Anything else worth saying here? No. So that's how I approach my wireframes. However, look, I appreciate that. Again, you can't really see it on the resolution. PowerPoint, if you don't want to go to this level of depth, you don't have the time, it's not added to the project, it's fine. Just remove all the color of the templates, use your standard boxes, and then just make sure you add the annotations there as well. Provide that to the end user so you can get the green light whether this is what they need before you move any forward. Okay, the other thing I want to call out are templates and themes, right? So this is what I have to say. A report has to look good, right? It has to look good, and you can't choose between nailing the requirements or making the report look good. You need to find the balance. Why? If a report looks good, end user can see that. They like to go and access or use a well-designed solution. It creates excitement, it creates buzz. Think about that first phase that I said about the common scenario, right? You want to still create that there. What you're seeing on screen are just some Power BI template files. I use PowerPoint to create these. Why do I use PowerPoint and nothing else? Because now it's been multiple times when, during the handover stage, I pass it on to a client or a customer, they haven't used some of the Affinity Designer, Figma, etc. And I can just see a little bit that they haven't used these before. You can create the same style of template files in PowerPoint just with additional design work as well, right? And here's the thing. If you want these, download them on my website. There's a lot more coming as well. Change them to your branding, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on this here, but I think we're good with time. I think we're good. I'm talking quick. All right. So, very easily, find your brand guidelines, right? If you don't have them, scrape the website. I do it all the time for some clients. Number 2, open PowerPoint, create some background images, right? Number 3, change the canvas size. I just have one rule. When you change the canvas size, don't allow any crazy scroll bars come up, or don't push your end users to stick their head in the screen just to read it. That's the rule, right? Do anything else. Now, just some additional stuff that I use always. Some of these do need a license. Canva, I use it all the time to remove sort of, if I'm scraping a website, to remove white backgrounds. And also, there's good tools on there for colors. Dribble. I always come to the point where I lose creativity. Not gonna lie, right? It happens. Need some inspiration. I love to use Dribble. It's more around web and app development, but again, it just gives you that inspiration if you really want to design something cool. Flat icon, I use it more for inspiration. I do have a license on this as well, but then I use inspiration here. I go into PowerPoint, I take icons from there, and then I change them around a little bit. The last one, Affinity Designer aligns with exporting images. If you're going to do all this work, don't export a horrible resolution. Otherwise, it doesn't make it worth your while, right? I like to use Affinity Designer for exporting images sometimes if I feel like they haven't exported well, depending on the design. And also I use it for spatial analysis, which I'm not an expert in, right? Lastly, don't give a Power BI template file away without creating a theme file, right? You have the UI in desktop, create a theme file, it creates the underlying JSON. You don't have to, there's other tools online like Power BI.tips where you can add a lot more parameters that might not exist or aren't available in desktop. But whatever you do, create a theme file, it makes life so much easier as well. Okay. So create set up Power BI template files, make them accessible. The other thing I always do as well, now I'm going more into the governance side in all honesty, I like to have a separation between enterprise BI and self-service BI, completely different talk. But when we create these sort of things, I like to maybe create two versions. At least the organization can then have a standard understanding which one is coming from where, right? Okay. Let's go back. So another way to create Power BI reports that deliver. Now it's about the user experience role. You need to bring your end users on a journey with you, right? The way I think of it is like this. When you land on a website, what do you see? Usually, if it's a well-designed website, the first thing you see is called the hero section. In summary, it does two things. What do they do? How can they help me? That's it. I like to have the same concept for my reports. And by the way, recently someone said to me, well, Laz, maybe you need a homepage of reports. It ain't great, right? Because it should come out as soon as someone lands on the first page. I disagree with that, right? But anyway, I'm not going to go through the bullet points here. What we're going to do is just show you an example. Okay, so this is one report I've developed, right, in the past, obviously removed all the data. Financial overview analysis. You have a bit of a navigation menu, right? Overview, you can go to the overview page, the contracts, audit. With more time, I'll design this a little bit differently. But the point is to see the content. So using bookmarks, you can create these sort of experiences. As soon as someone lands on the report, what's the purpose? Think back to what we said about those workshops. What are the core questions being asked, right? Primary audience, and there's a reason I'm adding this information, by the way. There's a reason we're adding this information. And again, using bookmarks, the other common thing that's an organization working more with now, one of the core frustrations some of the more senior people had is, well, does it include the weekend or exclude the weekend, etc., etc.? Having just a section to have the definitions and maybe even the formulas for the most obvious KPIs is important. Also, add a link to the data dictionary, right? Other things you could be doing as well, again, more on the governance side. If you're rolling out Power BI internally, it's all about creating this internal community as well, right? And I like to add, if we do have an internal community, I like to reference my reports back there and add the documentation there as well. And lastly, what else do I like doing? Many people don't know drill through, drill down, and various other elements. So sometimes I put a GIF here with a very strong piece of text to allow users to understand that this is available in the report as well. So again, it's just about bringing your users on a journey, right? Helping them understand the solution. If they don't understand how the solution works, they won't be using it. Okay, going back. The next one I have is guided learning. And I know this might not mean nothing now because I just made up guided learning. So what is it? Okay, so this is a different report, everyone, right? The different homepage. This is the retail analysis. You can click the three buttons there, it will take you to the right report page, nice and easy. But again, I'm going back to web development a little bit now, right? Have you maybe seen some websites recently that have this on-screen tutorial, right? So if I click guided learning, what do you see? You see a very similar experience to a homepage one, right? Also, a bit of an explanation what guided learning is, and you can navigate through it. So let's try it out, right? Click play, and now you start the experience. It gives you a bit of a helpful text, and then below you can see you can go back or forward into the experience. And it might not be as obvious, but you have a progress bar there to tell you what position you're in as well. So I'm going to click next. It now takes me into the report, right? These are the navigation buttons. Give a helpful bit of information. Click next. This is where you can slice and dice the data from. Click next. You can make it a bit more dynamic now. Think about the where are you trying to go, your objectives, your KPIs. So using the narrative visual and a bit of DAX, you can make this dynamic to say, dig into what's causing this because it's in the red. This is one of the core KPIs that links back to your objectives. So you start to see how, again, having such experience promotes the end users to the right place. And again, it makes them feel comfortable with the solution. There's different variations of what I call guided learning. This is the one that needs more bookmarks than other ones. Again, on my website, I have more simple versions because I do get pushback by a few people saying that there's too many bookmarks here. My rule is this: does it make the end user experience better? It's worth the time maintaining it. That's where I stand, right? But anyway, not gonna, and you can go all the way through it and then eventually click the little X and then you exit this experience as well, right? Okay, so really just to call out a few things. It boosts user confidence, it simplifies navigation, it increases engagement as well. Here's a tip or what we should be doing. Understand where your audience are on, have they been using Power BI for a long time? Do they use similar tools? What is the core narrative that they need help with? Because remember, you're going to have other people eventually accessing this report, and they're going to be questioning a lot of these elements as well, right? So take all that and incorporate it into the homepage, incorporate it into the guided learning experience. That's the type of information I personally would like to add on here. And actually, previously, I asked the end users, well, what would be valuable for anyone in the future to access this report to see on screen? And they give the information as well. Okay. So that's the guided learning experience all. Let's go back a moment. One exit it, leave it there. It's not boring. Okay. I usually like to describe it like this. I love going to a buffet, right? And when I go, I like trying it. Different flavors, different dishes, different ingredients. If you look at my plate, you'll be like, what's that, honestly? But when it comes to my Power BI visuals, I like sticking to the same visuals again and again and again. And I'm not scared to stick to the same visuals because when I find reports by using visuals for the sake of it, I've seen end users, once that excitement phase fizzles out, they need to crunch the numbers. It's Monday morning, board meetings, trade meetings, etc. They ditch it, they go back to a solution, an Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is, just so they can get the numbers quicker, right? And I've had feedback previously where I presented something similar, different topics. Someone said radar charts are still good. I'm not dissing radar charts, by the way. They are good. But the comparison I'm making here is most people, or 95% of people in an organization, would understand a standard clustered column chart over a radar chart, right? And in this instance here, I can give you many reasons why I can digest the information a lot easier here than here. It looks cool, but it doesn't mean it's right. So don't be scared to use the same visuals. Don't feel like you need to go to the custom marketplace and download something new. Stick to the same ones or the ones that portray the message in the best way. Yep. Okay. Moving on all. Focus. This is one of the basic ones from sort of Stephen Few's principles, but I find it very common. And that's why I wanted to call it out here. I find it's a very common thing. So just going to jump into the example, everyone. Here it is. Where do your eyes go first? Where's that, sorry? Red. Red. The red colours. What, these here? The bars. Oh, good. You was going to ruin my demo there, wouldn't you? You said the KPIs. But anyway, my eyes go below, right? And here's the thing. When people see this, they're probably thinking, oh, Laz just added pretty icons there, right? When you do something on the canvas, why are we doing it? The reason I add these icons here as well, even though I think they do look good, because I asked myself, what's the most important information? Feel free to challenge me. To me, the most important information is understanding, are we on target to something? That, for me, that's the most important information. Are we on target to something? That's where I want the end user's eyes to go first. And for that reason, I give more space to the KPIs, right? I really want them to stand out so end users can understand that's where we should go first. And then afterwards, so your objective is your homepage. Your KPIs are here. What's causing the KPIs to go up or down? It's below here. That's the sort of structure I like to follow, right? Okay, let's go back. Go back again and again. All right, so I couldn't have this talk without mentioning mobile. I've delivered a lot of mobile reports and it's come a long way. Has anyone here used Power BI Mobile? What? All right. Perfect. Okay. I've previously walked into an organization and mobile was important, and I found people pinching the screen to look at the numbers, right? I've used Power BI Mobile way back, right? And we've rolled it out to over 1,000 people as well. And this is why it was horrible before. Why am I calling it out? Because I feel many people might have never used it and heard something online or in the community, right? Or they did use it previously, they thought, and it's never gone back. This here is a thing of the past, right? I really enjoy development in mobile when it's applicable. In order to make your reports deliver, stand out, if there is mobile and mobile need, make sure you optimize them for mobile. The phone emulator has come a long way right now. So you can actually go ahead and create reports that really do look cohesive with your standard reports. Why am I saying this? It's really frustrating when you're holding a mobile report and you see it aligned to your organizational branding, it's got all the right things on there, and then you turn it around to look at the mobile version and it's just a white background with a few numbers on it as well. They look like two different reports that belong in two separate areas. So the point is, do take advantage of all the features that are now available in order to make them cohesive, right? And just a few things, I guess, worth highlighting. I use background images. People might have something against this. It was horrible using background images when you didn't have this option, by the way. If you're going to use mobile, use this option. I promise. Using the advanced option, they're always moving. It's called maintain layer order and advanced options, right? Why? You add a background image, this is what used to happen with end users. They would click the background image by accident and it would overlap all the visuals. It was a disaster, right? It looked like a broken mobile app. This fixes that. It came a long time ago. Not a lot of people know about it. That's why I'm calling it out. Auto-create feature. Yeah. It's good. It follows the Z technique, right? The point I'm making is they've advanced it, right? So if you haven't got any mobile requirements, go for it. Before you click publish though, just click phone emulator, ask the right question. Is it needed? Spend some time there. Okay, let's go back. More. Familiarization, everyone, right? Did someone finish it earlier? Okay. Familiarization, what do you mean by this? I've recently spoke about this. As a report developer, Power BI expert, whatever, right? The journey does not finish with publish. If you followed all these steps that we went through today and you click publish and then that's it, you're right at the end of the journey, you're letting go when it matters most. That's when it's time to start having some additional conversations with your end users, right? Make sure you monitor who's using it. Make sure you follow up with your end users. Ask them, what are the actions being taken here? How are we displaying the report? What's working? What's not working? It's fresh in everyone's mind, right? Now it's time to take any challenges that they may be having and incorporate back in before the other business priorities come into play as well, right? And then, again, I'm breaking into a bit more sort of governance as well, but this is now where all the documentation, all the videos, or what I always say, you need a Power BI internal community or portal. This is where all this feeds into as well, right? Make sure you add the supporting videos, documentations, the drop-in sessions if needed. It doesn't have to be so heavy, right? But it really helps people get on board at the end as well. Okay. And lastly, to finish up, right? We need everyone to speak the same data language, right? So what do I like to do? With all my Power BI reports, I always save a moment in the requirement gathering stage as well, right? To derive the DAX, but also the business logic, the definition, and the formula. Don't overcomplicate this, right? Do not overcomplicate this. What are the core KPIs you've gathered? Record them down. In all honesty, I don't care how we do that, right? I'm sure a lot of you, especially from a GUM side, might push back on me, but for the individual report, just make sure we derive this, make it available to the end users. I showed you, you could link it through the homepage as well. You could use an Excel spreadsheet per user that's available. You could extract the metadata from the DMV files using DAX Studio and then create another Power BI solution for the semantic model if you wanted to as well, right? That works. But the point is, make sure the end users at the end do understand what they are seeing on screen as well. It really does make all the difference. Okay? So, with that said, we have come to the 15 items we should all be doing to create Power BI reports that deliver. Again, just to really finish up though, those first 5 there are the ones that I find are always ignored. On your next project, try it out, push more to get this done, and I'll be very interested to hear if you did this and it didn't work, why it didn't work as well. So with that said, I'm going to pause there and open it up for any questions. Thank you. Any questions? Hey. So, and that is an Power BI app, right? Okay. So with apps now, we got all apps. So have you heard of all apps? Is a bit of a new, I haven't tested it out as much, but a landing page, the way I've seen it done previously was by creating a dashboard, if that's what you're, yeah. I'm not a fan of dashboards personally, right? I find that and that's the only time I've used dashboards, by the way, in production, funny enough, when we try to sort of replicate a landing page, people land there and then you create the tiles and then the tiles take you to the right section of the report. I'm against dashboards, different conversation. I would still stick to the homepage though, right? You have a lot more, you can customize it a lot more. And remember, the homepage is for the individual report, right? And the navigation links that you have in there are for the pages of that report as well. So if the question is, would I stick to a homepage even in that? I would, yeah. Yeah. And that's the landing page, right? Right, so you don't use dashboards where you use an actual report. Yeah. If you did do that, when people click the button to navigate to the relevant report, you still want a homepage there, I would say, because every report ideally likely has its own audience, its own purpose, its own objective. So it's nice for them to land at least into a place where, what is this report for? Yeah. Hey, Brian.
I would like to know more about how do you manage the expectation with the clients about when the report needs to be delivered? Because I have, for example, my stakeholders, they always ask me, oh, can you do it by today or tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a common thing, needed yesterday sort of thing, right? I think it comes down.
How do you even evaluate how long to build the solution that you are intending to? What
Yeah.
is your process in your mind?
Look, it really depends on the solution. I like to say, if I have a single audience, this is really important. If I have a single audience, one thing I like to do is set up maybe 3 to 4 workshops right away, right? These can be 1.5 to 2 hour workshops, right? And that there is just to gather the story, right? Beyond that, you then need to move into your design work. Beyond that, you need to do the build of the report. One thing we didn't even mention today was the underlying data, right? So it's about walking your end users through the process of how a good report is built, showing them the different phases, right? And helping them understand, well, actually, we are going to spend more time in doing the requirement gathering rather than just simply asking, what do you want? Because of these reasons here, right? We're then going to move into a design phase because it offers these type of benefits. It won't happen overnight. It's a snowball effect, right? And what I always like to say to people is try find one audience in the organization that is more sort of data driven and open to try this out. Make it successful with them, and then it gets communicated out to everyone else. But I guess the simple answer is walking through the process, tell them why it will take a bit more time. If it's an absolute report that must go live now, sure, do it, right? But find that one candidate report where you can do such a process. Yeah. Hey.
Just a few parts, but
Sure.
firstly, love the guided learning part. So first part of the question is, does it affect performance in any way of the report? And second part is, do you have any resources on how to sort of do similar things?
Sure. Performance-wise, no, I haven't had any issue with it. Setting it up, take the one I showed you, it takes some time to set up, but as long as you know how to group the bookmarks and configure them the right way, maintenance becomes a lot easier as well. I have got a video coming out how to do it. Hey.
So, essential project you spend on that.
Well, I don't have a percentage in all honesty. I try to spend as much time as needed on that there as possible. I'll tell you in a way of the deliverable, right? For this single audience, right? I want to gather this type of information. I want to have a concrete goal that's somewhat measurable. I want to understand the absolute KPIs that help us understand if we're moving towards it. I want to understand the formulas, the measures that go behind these. For each one of those, I want to understand how should we slice and dice it. In other words, the causes for them to be in the red or green. And then also I want to understand, well, if one of them's in the green or in the red, what type of action will you be taking? That's when I'll count that part completed, but just that part there as well. All the other elements, right? If we think about it, that's the story, the narrative, right? But then afterwards, in reality, in regards to, are you going to use any hierarchies, for instance? What's the level breakdown, right? What type of slices do you want? The report frequency. I haven't mentioned all these things today as well. But that's the deliverable that I'll hope to get out of that requirement gathering session. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how long it should take, depending on your audience. Yeah. By the way, I just want to see, I don't know. Yeah, we've got time. Right in front.
Quick one. Have you been in any situations where the customer said, I don't really know what I want, but using your experience? And how do you deal with it?
Yes, absolutely. Where,
Just take this from the back.
okay, so going to a workshop, we don't know what we want, right? Sure, oh, sorry. So you walk into a workshop or you come across an audience and they do not know what they want, right? I'm going to answer this question in two ways. Okay. If they don't know what they want, follow such an approach, right? Because I always like to say it's our job to assist the end users to understand what they want. However, they're the experts in the business and the industry. I am not. So I ask them a set of more tailored type of questions rather than just simply ask them, what do you want, to try and derive this information out. So it's about asking the right questions, listening, and having the follow-up questions. However, I've also been in a situation where I've asked these type of questions and they couldn't give anything. That's when you have to pause and say an internal conversation is needed. You don't need a dashboard, I'll be honest. Right? It saves you a lot of pain. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey.
In the situations, I've been there many times. You could start by the definition of that one, the dictionary as well.
Yeah.
That will help you to identify what's really the situation.
Potentially. Yeah.
Question asked, please.
Oh, sorry. I'm not used to you, am I?
So just I'm adding to what you said.
But that's because they want your.
They can't hear you. So the point that was made here, you are in that situation, potentially, you could start with a data dictionary, understand the different sort of things that they want to see, and then maybe that would be a good starting point to start to derive what they want as well. Yeah. Hey. Yeah. You know, Microsoft always confuse me sometimes with their new extension files, to be honest. But with that said, all right, cool. Sorry, I use a PBIR format, which is a newer format of Power BI files. I think it's more for version control as well. Not to be confused with the PBIT or PBIX, you have PBIR as well. In all honesty, I've used it a few times, but well, is it better for version control? Absolutely. For sort of multiple people to collaborate on the same reports? Yes. If you can use it, take advantage of it. I think that's my very high-level basic recommendation. Any other questions? Hey.
That's like shorten the timelines. Like, no, we don't want to go through that. How do you handle that? Have you walked away?
Good question.
Sorry, that's a lot to repeat.
No, okay, sorry, I thought to repeat it. Okay, so have you ever been in a situation where the client was being a bit more difficult, maybe they wanted to rush through each single of the steps. They might say, well, I don't understand why we're doing this, just get to what do you want, I'll show you the Excel spreadsheet created from there. I have been in these situations, right? And it's all about the why and basically pushing back. You have to feel comfortable to push back. I think that's the easiest one, the easiest answer, but it's the truth as well. I also have a 3-step rule, by the way. My 3-step rule is this. I push back once, twice, 3 times, I then stop, right? You push back, because then you get annoying, raise the risk, and let it fly afterwards. But you've raised the risk that we are going to go down the wrong path, potentially. Any other questions? No? Hey.
How do you basically in like an end-to-end project, Power BI analysis not just alone? So you have to work with a data engineer or a data analyst who have to create views for you or
Yes.
tables for you in the data. How do you make peace with them that, okay, that guy will say, okay, I'm not going to create that measure for you. So have you been in that situation that have you created DAX measures in there and it's difficult to create? You have to ask
Sure.
SQL guy to.
Absolutely. So yes, have you ever been in a situation, maybe in an organization where maybe the back-end team, engineers, etc., have their own sort of objective, what they want to derive in the underlying data warehouse, data platform, etc. They've derived it, that's the objective, that's what we're going with. However, you're doing this type of work and you're thinking to yourself, actually, it's not about creating the best underlying architecture here, it's about improving the decision-making process, right? It's about assisting the end users to get to where they need to get to, right? And the simple answer is, if you follow an approach like this, and you have it all sort of wireframed down, and you have the blueprint there, and you have the narrative there, ideally, you should put this in front of them and say, well, actually, this is the type of information we need for this very important stakeholder group. And then also, you can get the backing or the buy-in from the stakeholder group, and that will help you get what you need in the back end afterwards. Yeah. Following this process helps that. Okay. The other thing I'll leave you on all as well is, again, make sure to follow as well, right? But also, a lot of the stuff you see here, but be active in the Power BI community. That's what I'm making, right? So much of my learnings have come from there. The names that I've called out earlier, check them out as well. You can really pick up some good information, right? So thank you all.